I never thought I'd end up in a situation like this, tangled in emotions I don't fully understand, stuck between guilt and longing. It's all because of my Uncle Rick and his wife, Anna. Rick has been in my life for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I always saw him as the cool uncle, the guy who knew how to have a good time, cracking jokes at family gatherings, always with a drink in his hand and a carefree attitude. He was never the type to take life too seriously, and back then, I admired that about him. But as I got older, I started seeing him for who he really was. Rick wasn't just laid back, he was reckless. His lifestyle was chaotic, filled with bad decisions, failed relationships, and nights drowned in alcohol. He's been divorced twice, and neither of his marriages ended on good terms. He treats relationships like a revolving door, never committing to real emotional intimacy. And now, with Anna, his behavior is just as bad, if not worse. Anna is young, only 2 years older than me, and that alone makes their relationship seem strange. My mom has always pointed it out, saying how weird it is that Rick, a man in his late 40s, married someone barely out of college. What do they even have in common, she'd say. And honestly, I started asking myself the same thing. Their marriage never seemed like a partnership, at least not in the way I'd want a marriage to be. And the more time passed, the more I started noticing the cracks in their relationship. At first, I didn't think too much of it. Rick was just being Rick, drinking, tuning out, being selfish. But then, I started seeing how much it was affecting Anna. She wasn't just unhappy, she was stuck, and she didn't know how to get out. That's when everything started changing. That's when I started getting pulled into something I never saw coming. I always got along with Anna. Even though she was my uncle's wife, she was closer to my age, and we clicked in a way that made it easy to talk to her. We'd chat about random things, movies, music, the things we wanted to do in life. It was nothing deep at first, just casual conversations, but over time, I realized she was reaching out to me more and more. It started with small things, a text here and there, asking about something random, checking in on how I was doing. I thought nothing of it at first, but eventually, I started to notice a pattern. She would text me late at night when she couldn't sleep, and our conversations would drift toward more serious topics. She would talk about how lonely she felt, how Rick barely even noticed her anymore. She wasn't just venting, she was confiding in me, trusting me with her feelings in a way that I knew she wasn't doing with anyone else. That's when it really started to hit me. Anna wasn't just another woman in Rick's life. She wasn't like his ex-wives, who seemed to see his flaws from the beginning and eventually left. Anna was different. She still cared, still wanted things to work. But she was hurting, and she didn't know what to do about it. I didn't realize how deep I was getting involved until it was too late. At first, I told myself that I was just being a good friend. That I was just listening, supporting her in the way that no one else seemed to be. But looking back, I wonder if I was fooling myself. Maybe I ignored the warning signs. Maybe I let myself believe that we were just talking, that nothing more could come from it. But deep down, I think I always knew. I think I knew that when someone opens up to you in that way, when someone trusts you with their pain, it creates a bond that's hard to ignore. And maybe that's where everything started to go wrong. Rick has always been the life of the party. At least, that's how people describe him. He's the guy who's always cracking jokes, making everyone laugh, and making sure there's never a dull moment. But behind that easygoing, fun-loving exterior, there's something darker, something people choose to ignore or brush off as just Rick being Rick. His drinking isn't just a casual habit, it's a problem. A serious one. And the person who suffers the most because of it is Anna. From the outside, Rick and Anna's relationship never looked healthy. Even in the early days of their marriage, I could see the cracks forming. Rick never seemed like the kind of guy who was fully invested in a relationship, and with Anna, it was no different. At first, she tried to keep up, laughing along with his jokes, going along with his lifestyle, but over time, I noticed a change in her. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped smiling as much. She stopped talking about things she was excited about. It was like she was slowly fading into the background of his life. The drinking only made it worse. I don't think I ever saw Rick sober at a family gathering. He always had a beer in his hand, or a glass of something stronger. It started in the afternoon and went on late into the night. And when Rick drinks, he changes. He goes from being the fun-loving, joking guy to someone who is cruel, someone who enjoys putting others down. And the person who gets the worst of it is always Anna. At first, it was little things. He'd tease her, make a joke at her expense, play it off as something lighthearted. But over time, the teasing turned into outright humiliation. He'd call her naive, make fun of her opinions, talk down to her like she was a child who didn't understand the real world. And the worst part? He would do it in front of everyone. I remember one night in particular, at a family dinner, when things got really bad. Rick had been drinking since the afternoon, and by the time we all sat down at the dinner table, he was completely gone. Anna was sitting next to him, like always, trying to make small talk, trying to engage with him. She asked him about something simple, something about his work, just trying to include him in the conversation. And instead of responding like a normal person, Rick just laughed. "Jesus, Anna, you don't know what you're talking about," he said, shaking his head. "Why do you even bother asking these things?" Anna laughed nervously, trying to play it off. "I was just curious," she said. "I thought it was interesting." Rick rolled his eyes. "Yeah, well, you wouldn't get it. It's not your kind of thing." The room went quiet. I could see the way Anna's shoulders tensed, the way her face dropped just for a second before she forced another fake smile. She was embarrassed. Humiliated. And Rick wasn't done. "Seriously," he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's like you live in some fantasy world where everything is easy and simple. You don't know anything about real life." My dad, who usually stays out of these kinds of things, finally spoke up. "Rick, cool it," he said. But Rick just shrugged. "I'm just saying. Maybe if she paid attention once in a while instead of wasting time on useless crap, she'd know what she's talking about." I looked at Anna, and I saw the exact moment when she couldn't take it anymore. She excused herself from the table, her voice barely above a whisper, and left the room. And Rick? He didn't even notice. He just kept drinking, acting like nothing had happened. I couldn't just sit there. I couldn't pretend that what had just happened was normal. So, without thinking, I got up and followed her. I found Anna in the bathroom, sitting on the floor, knees pulled up to her chest, trying to hold herself together. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't crying, at least not yet, but she was barely holding it in. For a second, I just stood there. I didn't know what to say. What do you even say to someone in that situation? "I'm sorry?" That didn't seem like enough. "He's an asshole?" She already knew that. So instead, I just sat down next to her, letting the silence fill the space between us. After a few moments, she took a deep breath and whispered, "I hate this." I didn't ask her what she meant. I already knew. That was the moment I realized how bad things really were. Up until then, I had assumed that maybe it was just a rough patch, that maybe things would get better. But sitting there next to Anna, seeing the way she looked so small, so broken, I knew this wasn't just a rough patch. This was her life. This was what she dealt with every single day. And that night was just the beginning. After that night at the family gathering, something changed between me and Anna. Maybe it was because I was the only one who really saw what happened, the only one who acknowledged how badly Rick treated her. Or maybe it was because I was the only one who didn't pretend everything was fine. Either way, from that moment on, Anna started confiding in me more. At first, it was small things, random texts, casual conversations that didn't seem like they meant much. She'd message me about a movie she had just watched, or something funny she saw online. But in between those messages, there would be something deeper, something that hinted at how she was really feeling. She'd mention how lonely she was, how she felt like Rick barely noticed her anymore. She never said it outright, but I could tell, she was struggling. And I didn't know what to do about it. I wanted to help, but I wasn't sure how. What could I say? Leave him? That felt too easy, too simplistic. I knew it wasn't that simple. Relationships are complicated, and when you're married, especially to someone like Rick, it's not as easy as just walking away. So instead, I just listened. I let her vent, let her say whatever she needed to say, and I tried to be the person she could turn to when she had no one else. But the more we talked, the more I started realizing something. I wasn't just being a friend. I wasn't just there to support her. I cared. More than I should have. At first, I ignored it. I told myself that I just felt bad for her, that I just hated seeing someone I cared about in such a toxic situation. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I enjoyed talking to her. I looked forward to her texts. I wanted to be the person she turned to. And that scared me. Because no matter how much I wanted to deny it, I knew that what I was feeling wasn't just concern, it was something more. And I wasn't the only one who felt it. One night, a few weeks after that family gathering, I stopped by Rick and Anna's place to pick something up. Rick wasn't home, he was probably out drinking somewhere, and Anna was there alone. She invited me in, told me to stay for a bit, and I didn't see a reason to say no. We sat on the couch, talking like we always did. At first, it was lighthearted, random things, funny stories, nothing serious. But as the night went on, the conversation started to shift. She started talking about her marriage, about how distant Rick had become. She said she felt invisible, like she didn't even exist to him anymore. "I don't even remember the last time he really looked at me," she admitted. Like, really looked at me. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her that she deserved better, that she shouldn't have to feel this way. But I knew she already knew that. So instead, I just sat there, listening, letting her talk. Then she asked me something that caught me off guard. "What about you?" she said. "Are you seeing anyone?" I laughed, trying to brush it off. "No," I said. "Not really." She tilted her head, studying me for a moment. "That surprises me," she said. "You're a great guy. Smart, funny, good-looking. Someone's got to see that." I felt my face heat up, and for the first time, I didn't know how to respond. I told myself it was nothing. She was just being nice. But then she kept going. "You deserve someone who sees you for who you are," she said. "Someone who actually appreciates you." There was something in the way she said it, something in the way she looked at me, that made my stomach twist. And for the first time, I realized just how deep I was in. I wasn't just a friend to her anymore. And she wasn't just Rick's wife. Something was shifting between us. And I didn't know how to stop it. That night at Rick and Anna's house stuck with me. It was the first time I really let myself acknowledge that something was shifting between us. The way she looked at me, the way she spoke, it wasn't just friendly concern. There was something deeper, something unspoken hanging in the air between us. And the worst part? I didn't hate it. But I knew I should have. I spent the next few days trying to convince myself that I was overthinking things, that I was just reading too much into a few words and a look. Anna was lonely, frustrated, trapped in a marriage that was slowly suffocating her. Of course, she needed someone to talk to. Of course, she would say things like that. It didn't mean anything. But then the texts kept coming. She would reach out at odd hours, sometimes late at night, when Rick wasn't home or when he had locked himself in his office, drinking alone. At first, it was casual. A funny meme. A random question about a movie. But then, the messages became more personal. "I can't sleep. My mind won't shut off. Rick came home drunk again. He didn't even say hi to me. Do you ever feel like you're just stuck?" And I would always respond. Because how could I not? I told myself I was just being a good friend. I was just there for her because she had no one else. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was, I liked being the person she turned to. I liked that she felt comfortable enough to open up to me. I liked that when she felt alone, she reached out to me and not to Rick. But that feeling, that small satisfaction, came with a heavy weight of guilt. Because no matter how much I told myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a line. And then came the night when everything changed. I had stopped by their house again, just to pick up something I had left behind. Rick wasn't home, no surprise there. Anna answered the door, and she looked different. Not bad, just different. Her hair was a little messier than usual, like she had been lying around all day. She was in sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, her face free of makeup, but she still looked beautiful. It caught me off guard. "Hey," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You in a hurry?" I wasn't. But I probably should have been. "No, not really," I admitted. She smiled, stepping back to let me in. "Then stay for a bit." I knew I should have said no. I knew I should have made up an excuse and left. But I didn't. We sat on the couch, talking like we always did. At first, it was lighthearted, something about a TV show she had been watching, a funny story about her dog. But as the night went on, the conversation turned heavier. She started talking about Rick again. About how distant he had become. About how she felt invisible in her own home. "I don't even feel like a wife anymore," she said quietly, staring down at her hands. "I feel like a ghost." I didn't know what to say. I could see how much she was hurting, how badly she just wanted to feel seen. And without thinking, I reached out and placed my hand over hers. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place, something raw, something desperate. And then she whispered, "Do you see me?" My throat went dry. I knew what she meant. And I knew what was about to happen. I should have pulled away. I should have told her that this was wrong. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I see you." And then she kissed me. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't rushed. It was slow, hesitant, like she was waiting for me to pull away, to stop her. But I didn't. I kissed her back. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about Rick. I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I was just thinking about her. And for the first time, I realized just how far I had fallen. The moment Anna kissed me, it felt like time slowed down. Her lips were soft, hesitant, almost as if she was waiting for me to stop her. But I didn't. Instead, I kissed her back. And the second I did, everything shifted. It was like a dam had broken, all the tension between us crashing down at once. Every late-night text, every quiet moment of understanding, every unspoken feeling that had built up over time, it was all there, pouring into that kiss. For a few seconds, I let myself forget everything else. I wasn't thinking about Rick, or my family, or how wrong this was. All I could think about was her. But then, as quickly as it started, reality slammed into me. I pulled away, breathless, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Anna, we can't. But she didn't let me finish. She shook her head, her eyes searching mine. Please don't say that, she whispered. Please, just, don't. Her voice was barely audible, but I could hear the emotion behind it. The sadness. The loneliness. The desperation. She wasn't just looking for comfort, she was looking for something to hold on to. Something real. And somehow, in the mess of her marriage, in the isolation she felt with Rick, she had found that in me. I should have walked away. I should have put distance between us and told her that we needed to stop before we made a mistake. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for her again. And this time, there was no hesitation. The second kiss was different. It wasn't careful, wasn't questioning. It was urgent, full of all the things neither of us had been able to say. My hands tangled in her hair, hers gripped my arms, and within seconds, we weren't just kissing, we were holding on to each other like we needed it to survive. Somewhere between kisses, we moved to the couch, our bodies pressed so close it was impossible to tell where I ended and she began. My hands roamed over her back, pulling her closer, and she let out a quiet sigh against my lips. Everything about it felt right in the moment, even though I knew, deep down, I would regret it later. The room felt smaller, the air warmer, and for the first time in a long time, neither of us felt alone. It didn't take long before the inevitable happened. Clothes came off, barriers disappeared, and the space between us was gone entirely. It wasn't just a physical thing, there was emotion behind it, so much emotion, like we had both been waiting for this moment without even realizing it. And for the first time, Anna didn't feel invisible. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just the guy who stood in the background, watching from the sidelines. For the first time, we weren't just two people stuck in an impossible situation. We were something more. But then, just as quickly as it happened, it was over. The weight of what we had just done settled in like a thick fog. Anna sat up first, pulling the blanket around her, avoiding my gaze. I could see it in her face, the regret, the guilt. It mirrored exactly what I was feeling. I wanted to say something, to fix it somehow, but what could I even say? That it didn't mean anything? That it was a mistake? Because that would be a lie. It did mean something. And that was what scared me the most. The silence between us stretched, growing heavier by the second. Finally, Anna let out a shaky breath and whispered, "What do we do now?" And for the first time in my life, I didn't have an answer. The weight of what had just happened between Anna and me settled in like a storm cloud. The room, which had felt so charged with energy just moments before, now felt suffocating. I could hear the soft rustling of fabric as Anna wrapped the blanket tighter around herself, her back turned to me. She hadn't spoken since she asked, "What do we do now?" And I still didn't have an answer. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what we had done. The rational part of me, the part that still had some sense of morality, kept screaming that this was wrong, that it had always been wrong, that we had just crossed a line we could never uncross. But another part of me, the part that had been drawn to Anna for longer than I cared to admit, was whispering that maybe this was inevitable. I sat up, running a hand through my hair, my pulse still hammering in my chest. "Anna," I started, but I didn't even know what to say. She exhaled sharply and turned to face me. Her eyes were glassy, like she was on the verge of tears, but she refused to let them fall. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. Her voice was small, fragile, so unlike the Anna I knew. "I don't know how to go back from this." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Maybe we pretend it didn't happen," I suggested, though the words felt hollow the moment I said them. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You really think we can do that?" I didn't. Silence settled between us again, and in that moment, all I could think about was Rick. My uncle. The man who, despite his flaws, his drinking, his emotional neglect, his selfishness, was still family. How could I face him now? How could I look him in the eye knowing what I had done? And what about my parents? What would they think of me if they ever found out? I rubbed my face with my hands, frustration building in my chest. "This was a mistake," I muttered, more to myself than to Anna. "We shouldn't have." "Don't," she cut in, her voice sharp. "Don't say it like that." I looked at her, confused. She hugged the blanket around herself and took a deep breath. "I know this was wrong," she admitted. "I know we shouldn't have done it. But," she hesitated, biting her lip before continuing. "It didn't feel like a mistake." I stared at her, my heart hammering against my ribs. Because I knew exactly what she meant. It was wrong, yes. But it hadn't felt that way in the moment. It had felt real. And maybe that was the worst part. Anna looked down at her hands, her fingers gripping the blanket tightly. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't keep living like this. I feel like I'm disappearing." I knew she wasn't just talking about what had just happened between us. She was talking about Rick. About the way he treated her, the way he made her feel small, the way he ignored her existence until she felt like she wasn't even a person anymore. "I don't know how to help you," I admitted. Her eyes met mine, filled with something unreadable. "You already have." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to tell myself that I had done something good, that being there for her had actually helped her in some way. But had I? Or had I just made things even more complicated? We sat there for what felt like forever, neither of us knowing what to say. Eventually, Anna spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't regret being with you," she said. "But I regret that it had to happen like this." That hit me hard. Because I didn't regret it either. I regretted the situation. I regretted the betrayal. I regretted the pain this would cause if anyone ever found out. But I didn't regret her. And that terrified me. After a long pause, I stood up, grabbing my shirt from the floor and pulling it over my head. "I should go," I said, even though I didn't want to. Anna nodded but didn't say anything. She just watched as I gathered my things, her expression unreadable. When I reached the door, I hesitated, my hand on the handle. "Are you gonna be okay?" She gave me a small, sad smile. "I don't know." Neither did I. I walked out without looking back, but the second the door shut behind me, the guilt hit me like a freight train. I had betrayed my uncle. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And worst of all? I wasn't sure if I could ever truly regret it. After that night, I did what any coward would do. I avoided Anna. I ignored her texts. Stopped replying to her late-night messages. If I ran into her at a family gathering, I kept my distance. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that keeping away from her would make it easier to forget what happened. But I couldn't forget. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel her lips on mine, still hear the way she whispered my name like it was the only thing that mattered. The guilt was constant, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake off. It followed me everywhere. I'd be sitting at dinner with my parents, and suddenly, I'd remember the way her hands had gripped my shoulders that night. I'd be watching TV, and out of nowhere, I'd hear her voice in my head, telling me how lost she felt. I knew I should have felt nothing but shame. But I didn't. Instead, I felt longing. And that was what scared me the most. Rick had no idea, of course. He was still his usual self, loud, careless, and completely oblivious. I watched him at family gatherings, the way he treated Anna like an afterthought, the way he barely acknowledged her presence unless it was to make some condescending remark. It made my blood boil. I wanted to grab him by the collar and shake him, tell him to wake up and see her, see the woman he was losing. But I couldn't do that. Because deep down, I knew that part of me didn't want him to fix things. Part of me wanted him to lose her. And that realization made me feel even worse. Anna, on the other hand, wasn't avoiding me. She wasn't texting me as much anymore, but she wasn't pretending like nothing had happened either. At the last family dinner, I caught her looking at me more than once. And when our eyes met, there was no shame in hers, just sadness. Like she was waiting for me to acknowledge what we had done. But I couldn't. I didn't know how. Then, one night, she finally broke the silence. I was sitting in my car outside my apartment when my phone lit up with her name. My heart clenched the second I saw it. "Anna, are we ever going to talk about this?" I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't bring myself to type anything. Because what was I supposed to say? That I thought about her every day? That I couldn't sleep without replaying that night in my head? That I wanted her, but I knew I could never have her? I locked my phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. But ignoring her didn't make her go away. A few days later, I ran into her again, this time, completely by accident. I had stopped by my uncle's house to drop off something my mom had asked me to return. I thought Rick would be home, but when Anna opened the door, I knew I had messed up. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Hey," I said awkwardly. She crossed her arms over her chest. "Hey." An awkward silence stretched between us. I wanted to turn around and leave, to pretend I hadn't just shown up at her doorstep like an idiot. But before I could, she stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" I should have said no. I should have walked away. But instead, I nodded. And just like that, I was back in the place where everything had changed. She led me to the living room, and I couldn't help but glance at the couch, the same couch where we had tangled ourselves together just weeks ago. She noticed and let out a quiet sigh. "I hate this," she said. I looked at her. "Hate what?" "This weirdness between us." She met my gaze, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something besides sadness in her eyes. Frustration. Maybe even anger. "You've been avoiding me." I exhaled sharply. "Anna, what do you want me to do? Act like nothing happened?" She shook her head. "No. She paused, running a hand through her hair. "I just don't want to feel like I'm losing the one person who actually sees me." Her words hit me hard. Because the truth was, I didn't want to lose her either. I ran a hand over my face, trying to think straight. Anna, this is messed up. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think I don't know that? For a moment, neither of us said anything. The tension was so thick I could barely breathe. Then she took a step closer. And suddenly, we were right back where we started, standing too close, hearts pounding too fast, the air between us charged with something we both knew we couldn't act on again. But the worst part? I wasn't sure I had the strength to stop it. As Anna stepped closer, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into something dark and dangerous, something I couldn't pull myself away from. I should have taken a step back. I should have walked out that door. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, frozen, watching as she closed the space between us. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. The tension between us was unbearable, thick with everything left unsaid. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. Anna, we can't keep doing this. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I know, she whispered. I know, but, she hesitated, her voice breaking. I don't know how to stop. That was the problem. Neither of us did. We were caught in something we had no control over. Something that should have never started. Something that couldn't last. I clenched my fists, trying to fight the pull I felt toward her. Rick. She flinched at his name. Don't, she pleaded. Don't bring him into this right now. But he's in this, Anna. Whether we want him to be or not. I ran a frustrated hand through my hair. He's my uncle. He's your husband. This isn't just some secret we can keep pretending doesn't exist. She closed her eyes for a moment, like she was trying to keep herself together. When she opened them again, there was pain there, so much pain. I know it's wrong, she admitted. But, for once, I just want something that feels right. I inhaled sharply, the weight of her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Because I wanted that too. I wanted her. And that was what made this so damn impossible. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking. The only sound was the heavy rhythm of our breathing, the unsaid words hanging between us like a storm waiting to break. And then she whispered something that changed everything. I think I'm in love with you. My chest tightened. My entire body went rigid. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I wasn't supposed to want to hear that. But I did. And it terrified me. Anna, my voice was barely audible. She took another step closer, her fingers lightly brushing against mine. It was such a small touch, but it felt like a lightning strike. Tell me you don't feel the same, she said. Tell me you don't think about me the way I think about you, and I'll let you go. I'll never bring it up again. I opened my mouth to say it. To lie. To tell her that she was wrong, that she had imagined everything between us. But I couldn't. Because I did feel it. I had been feeling it for longer than I wanted to admit. The way I always noticed her at family gatherings, even before all of this. The way I had looked forward to our late-night conversations, even when I knew they were getting too personal. The way I had hated seeing Rick treat her like she was invisible. I had been falling for her before I even realized it. And now, I was completely in it. I took a shaky breath. I don't know what you want me to say, I admitted. She let out a bitter laugh. I think you do. I wanted to tell her that none of this would end well. That even if she left Rick, even if we somehow justified this to ourselves, we would still have to live with the consequences. But instead of saying any of that, I reached for her. And just like that, the last bit of restraint between us shattered. I should have walked away. I should have made the right choice. But I didn't. Because sometimes, the wrong thing feels too much like home. Aftermath. I didn't go home that night. I stayed. And in the morning, reality crashed down like a tidal wave. We didn't talk about what came next. We didn't talk about Rick, or my family, or how we were going to move forward. All we did was exist in the moment, clinging to something that we both knew would destroy us. And as I finally left her house, stepping into the cold morning air, I realized something that made my stomach twist. There was no going back. Not now. Not ever. Moral of the story. Actions have consequences, no matter how strong emotions are, every choice we make has repercussions. The protagonist allowed his feelings to dictate his actions, and now he must live with the guilt, the risk of hurting his family, and the uncertainty of what comes next. Temporary comfort can lead to permanent regret. Seeking solace in moments of weakness may feel right in the moment, but it can create long-term damage. The protagonist and Anna found comfort in each other, but that comfort came at the cost of their integrity, trust, and relationships. Unresolved pain can lead to destructive decisions. Anna felt lost in her marriage, and instead of addressing the core issue, her toxic relationship with Rick, she sought validation elsewhere. Similarly, the protagonist let his emotional connection override his moral compass. When pain isn't dealt with properly, it often leads to choices that make things worse. Love doesn't justify betrayal, feelings alone don't make something right. Even though Anna and the protagonist developed real emotions for each other, their relationship was built on deception, secrecy, and betrayal. A love that starts in dishonesty often leads to more heartbreak. Avoiding problems doesn't make them disappear. The protagonist tried to distance himself from Anna after their first mistake, but avoiding the situation didn't make the feelings go away. When issues aren't confronted directly, they tend to spiral out of control. The right thing is often the hardest to do. Walking away from temptation, even when emotions are involved, is difficult, but necessary. The protagonist knew from the beginning that his relationship with Anna was wrong, yet he allowed himself to be pulled back in. Doing what's right sometimes means making painful sacrifices. Respect and communication are the foundations of healthy relationships. Rick's mistreatment of Anna pushed her away, but instead of finding a healthy way to address their problems, she sought emotional refuge in someone else. If a relationship lacks respect, kindness, and communication, it will inevitably lead to heartbreak. Final thought. This story highlights the complexity of human emotions and the danger of crossing moral boundaries. Love and loneliness can cloud judgment, but in the end, integrity matters more than fleeting moments of passion. The true lesson here is that making the right choice, even when it's painful, is always better than living with regret.